In episode 41, titled Coordinate Seamlessly with the 3PO, we focus on the simple truth that great assessments are built on great collaboration. A third-party assessment organization, TPO, is not an audience to impress. It is a partner that depends on crisp communication, dependable logistics, and predictable evidence. When that partnership is shaped early and reinforced daily, the assessment cadence becomes smooth rather than frantic, and findings reflect actual control performance rather than avoidable confusion. The payoff is practical: fewer last-minute scrambles, fewer misunderstandings about scope or artifacts, and a defensible assurance story that stands up to review. Think of the relationship as an engineered workflow rather than a series of ad hoc requests. Once that mindset clicks, nearly every friction point becomes a solvable coordination problem. Strong coordination begins with a single, reliable intake channel for every request, question, and change. Whether you choose a ticket queue, a controlled mailbox, or a collaboration space with structured forms, the aim is the same: one front door, no side doors. A centralized intake eliminates duplicate asks, stops conflicting answers from circulating, and creates a durable audit trail of who asked for what and when. It also allows you to triage intelligently, routing technical items to engineers, policy questions to governance leads, and scheduling topics to the project manager without delay. By resisting the urge to handle quick off-channel questions, you protect the team from context loss and preserve continuity when people rotate or are briefly unavailable. Over time, the intake becomes a living index of the assessment, searchable, and defensible. Alongside the intake, publish a contact matrix, office hours, and escalation paths before the first evidence pull. The contact matrix should name primary and backup owners for each domain, the preferred medium for urgent contact, and realistic response windows that reflect time zones and on-call rotations. Clear office hours help the assessment team plan interviews, walkthroughs, and ad hoc clarifications without repeatedly checking for availability. Explicit escalation paths reduce awkward delays when a blocker appears. Instead of guessing whom to ping, the assessor follows a defined route, and the issue moves. The subtle benefit is cultural. When everyone sees a transparent, agreed structure for contact and escalation, the relationship shifts from personalities to process, which is exactly where professional assurance work thrives. Before artifacts begin to flow, align on evidence formats, file names, and versioning conventions in writing. Agreement here prevents countless micro-frictions later. Commit to standard file types for policies, screenshots, exports, and configuration bundles so the assessor can open and analyze without hunting for converters. Define file name patterns that encode system, control reference, date, and version, so a reviewer can trace lineage at a glance and avoid mixing drafts with finals. State how version bumps occur, whether by semantic tags or date-stamped increments, and how superseded files are retired but preserved for traceability. This level of care may seem fussy, yet it removes noise from every handoff. The result is less back and forth about missing fields or unreadable formats, and more attention on the substance of control performance. Smooth access beats heroic file transfers, so pre-provision what the TPAO needs: accounts, least privilege roles, and safe test datasets. Provisioning ahead of time prevents the opening week from dissolving into ticket purgatory. Define read-only roles, session recording where appropriate, and discrete resource scopes that map to the agreed testing boundaries. Seed environments with synthetic but realistic data so test steps can run end-to-end without risking privacy or production integrity. Document access terms, expiration dates, and the process for emergency revocation to keep risk posture intact. When the assessor logs in on day one and finds precisely the views and tools they need, momentum builds immediately and the stage is set for focused, efficient execution. Daily stand-ups keep that momentum and make small problems stay small. A short, disciplined meeting each business day, 10 to 15 minutes with a clear agenda, surfaces progress, blockers, and schedule adjustments while there is still time to adapt. Use the stand-up to confirm which artifacts were received, which interviews are locked, and where a decision is needed from leadership. Capture these items in the same system that holds your intake so the history stays unified. Resist turning stand-ups into troubleshooting marathons. Instead, record the issue, assign an owner, and move detailed work into follow-ups. The cadence builds confidence. Both sides see continuous motion, and surprises are reduced to manageable exceptions rather than disruptive shocks. All of this discipline is wasted if scope boundaries and sampling choices are fuzzy, so lock them before testing begins. Define the systems, environments, and timeframes that are in scope, and map them to the control set with explicit rationale. For sampling, agree on methods tied to risk, volume, and variability. For example, select user accounts across roles and geographies, or pick change tickets across service tiers and seasons to capture real diversity. Write these choices down with selection logic and replacement rules if a sample item is invalid. Clarity here prevents reruns, eliminates accusations of handpicking, and keeps the evidence story coherent when readers ask why these items, in this order, tell the truth about control effectiveness. Traceability is the heartbeat of a credible package, so provide evidence identifiers that link every artifact to controls, systems, and dates. A simple, consistent identifier schema, referenced in file names, trackers, and interview notes, lets an assessor move from a finding to the exact log, configuration line, or ticket without guesswork. Build a crosswalk that maps each identifier to its control reference and system owner, and keep the crosswalk current as versions evolve. Embed light metadata in documents where feasible. Control ID, system tag, date, and short description in a header or properties field can save hours downstream. These small affordances mean a reviewer spends time analyzing the content, not deciphering where it belongs. Avoiding surprises is not just polite, it is risk control. Announce planned maintenance, configuration changes, and any security incidents as soon as they materialize, even if you do not yet have every detail. Early alerts allow the assessment team to pause or adjust test steps that would otherwise be invalidated by shifting conditions. They also earn credibility. When you volunteer changes without prompting, the assessor sees a partner committed to accuracy, not optics. Build a habit of same-day notifications through the agreed intake channel. Tag the impacted controls or systems and propose next steps, such as revalidating a sample or capturing additional logs. The goal is to keep the assurance narrative honest and continuous. Consider a concrete case. A hotfix is deployed mid-assessment to resolve a production defect that touches authentication logic. The moment the change is approved, notify the TPAO through the intake, include the change record, testing notes, and deployment window, and flag which test cases might be affected. Document the variance from the original baseline, state why the deviation was necessary, and propose a retest window once the environment stabilizes. Capture before and after evidence, config snapshots, code diffs where appropriate, and access logs to show that the fix did not erode existing controls. By treating the hotfix as a first-class assessment event rather than a side note, you preserve integrity and avoid the far worse outcome of findings derived from conditions that no longer exist. Even with crisp artifacts, words can still trip us. Encourage clarifying interviews to resolve ambiguous control language and close interpretation gaps early. Framework phrases can be surprisingly elastic. What one team calls segmentation, another might frame as traffic policy with exceptions. Short, focused interviews let assessors test their understanding, and they let control owners demonstrate the live control path policy to configuration, to monitoring, to response, without drowning in attachments. Prepare by identifying the controls most prone to semantic drift and inviting the right mix of owner, engineer, and governance lead. Record decisions made in these sessions and anchor them to the evidence identifiers so the reasoning remains visible long after the call ends. Coordination loses value if it is invisible, so track action items, owners, and due dates in a place everyone can see. Good tracking is more than a to-do list. It is a living contract that assigns accountability and signals progress. Keep the entries precise, state the artifact or decision required, name the single owner, set a realistic due date, and log status updates in brief, dated notes. Avoid crowding multiple owners onto one item. If a task truly spans roles, split it. Review the tracker in stand-ups, close items promptly, and archive completed entries rather than deleting them to preserve institutional memory. When the board shows movement every day, morale improves, and external observers can tell the program is in control of its own work. If there is a single memory hook to carry forward, it is this: communicate early, standardize artifacts, and coordinate changes. Early communication keeps the assessment current with reality rather than yesterday's design. Standardized artifacts compress the time between request and analysis and remove doubt about what was reviewed. Coordinated change management ensures that fixes, maintenance, and incident response are woven into the evidence story rather than treated as inconvenient interruptions. Together, those habits form a resilient operating model that scales from small point reviews to complex multi-system assessments without reinventing the playbook each time. As the relationship matures, the benefits compound. The TPAO learns your environment's vocabulary and rhythms. Your team learns the assessor's evidence preferences and review patterns. Reuse grows naturally. Interview guides become sharper, baseline screenshots become canonical, and data exports come pre-filtered to the columns that matter. The conversation shifts from "where is that document" to "how well does this control resist drift under change?" That upgrade in dialogue quality is where true assurance lives. It produces findings that teach rather than merely tally, and it equips leadership with specifics about durability, not just coverage. A final note on posture. Coordination does not mean relinquishing rigor, and partnership does not mean glossing over issues. The healthiest dynamic is frank and professional. When evidence is weak, say so and agree on a path to strengthen it. When a control is strong, show how monitoring and metrics prove it holds under stress. Carry a consistent ethical line through every exchange, and treat each correction or clarification as an investment in the next review. The next assessment should start closer to the target because of what this one taught both parties. In closing, the partnership becomes real when it is codified. Conclude this cycle by publishing a concise coordination playbook that captures what worked: the intake model, contact practices, evidence standards, access recipes, stand-up cadence, scoping logic, traceability scheme, change notification rules, interview protocols, and tracking norms. Share it with the TPAO as a living agreement and with internal teams as your standard operating pattern for external reviews. When new stakeholders arrive, the playbook onboards them into an already humming machine. That is how Coordinate Seamlessly with the 3PO moves from a good intention to a durable operating advantage, one that reduces noise, accelerates analysis, and keeps the assurance story faithful to how your controls actually perform. Thanks for listening. For more audio courses, daily newsletters, and more, please visit baremetalcyber.com.